Welcome to this deep dive, brought to you today by Dr. Delong and Kinexa Formation. To kick things off, I want you to indulge me in a really quick thought experiment.
Oh, I love a good thought experiment. Let's hear it.
Okay, so I want you to imagine a game of chess, but this particular game of chess is being played at like 50 kilometers per hour.
Okay, fast chess.
Right. And the players are wearing these heavy layers of plastic and high-density foam armor. And the entire board is a totally frictionless surface.
That sounds completely terrifying, honestly.
It sounds completely chaotic, right? But that is the exact environment we are stepping into today.
It really is. I mean, it is the absolute definition of controlled chaos. And what's so compelling is that when you strip away the noise and the violence and just the sheer speed of ice hockey, you are left with a sport that's dictated by some of the most extreme physics and neurological demands of any human activity.
Which is exactly what our mission is for today. We are going to completely deconstruct this high-speed, high-impact world.
We really are. We'll trace its roots back to, the frozen lakes of 19th century Canada. We're going to break down the really rigid physical laws that govern the players' bodies. And most importantly, I think we'll explore the fascinating neurobiomechanics that allow the human brain to process a game that's moving literally faster than conscious thought.
It's wild to think about. But to really understand these athletes, we first have to understand the utterly alien environment they operate in. Because if you think about it, almost every other major global sport is played on grass or turf or hardwood.
Right, surfaces that are totally defined by friction.
Exactly. Ice hockey is defined by the total absence of it.
Which fundamentally changes the physics of everything that happens out there. I mean, if we look at the origins, modern hockey was born in Canada in the mid-19th century. You had these British soldiers stationed there, and they tried to keep playing their European stick and ball games, like shinty or hurley.
But I'm guessing the Canadian winters kind of got in the way.
Yeah, exactly. The harsh winters and deep snow forced them to adapt. So they moved the games onto frozen lakes. And by 1875, the sport had evolved enough to see the first indoor match in Montreal.
Wow, 1875.
Yeah, and just a couple of years later, in 1877, students at McGill University actually codified the first official written rules. But the moment they transitioned to that frictionless sheet of ice, everything changed. Inertia became the dominant force. Honestly, Sir Isaac Newton is the real referee out there.
Newton is the referee, yeah, because without friction to dissipate kinetic energy, an object in motion just stays in motion.
Right.
Which perfectly explains why the equipment looks the way it does.
Yeah.
I mean, starting with the skates, if you look at a figure skate, they have those jagged little toe picks at the front.
Yeah, the toe picks that figure skaters use to grip the ice for their jumps and pivots.
Right, but hockey skates don't have those at all.
No, not at all. A hockey skate is this pure biomechanical tool designed for an inherently unstable environment. The blade is curved, and without those toe picks, it's engineered entirely for maneuverability and extreme edge control.
Because they're not just, like, passively gliding around out there.
Exactly. They use the really sharp inside and outside edges of those blades to literally carve deep trenches into the ice. And that carving action is the only way to execute the abrupt, violent braking maneuvers they need to instantly change direction. It's how they create space. The kinetic force transferring through their ankles and knees during a high-speed stop is just immense.
And they have to execute those violent stops while tracking the puck, which in French is called a disc or rondelle.
Right.
And it's basically a solid piece of vulcanized rubber. But I was fascinated to learn to actually keep the pucks in a literal freezer before the game.
Oh, yeah. The material science behind that is brilliant. I mean, vulcanized rubber is naturally bouncy at room temperature because of how its polymer chains are structured.
Wait, a tennis ball?
Right. If you dropped a warm puck onto a hard sheet of ice, it would ricochet and bounce around exactly like a tennis ball. It would be unplayable. So, by keeping it in a freezer, you temporarily alter the elasticity of the rubber. The cold restricts the molecular movement, which completely deadens the bounce.
So a frozen puck absorbs the impact rather than returning it.
Exactly, meaning it stays perfectly flat on the ice. And that stability is absolutely essential when it's traveling at the speeds we see in professional leagues.
Speeds that regularly top 160 kilometers per hour, by the way.
Mm.
So when you combine a flat trajectory with zero friction, the puck is essentially a low-altitude missile.
It really is a missile.
So if you're a player, sharing the ice with that projectile, your body has to be built for pure survival.
It raises a totally critical question about biomechanics. You aren't just building an agile athlete out there, you are building a physical anchor. The typical elite player weighs around 90 kilograms, or about 200 pounds. And on a frictionless surface, Newton's second law force equals mass times acceleration dictates every single interaction.
So having mass is a massive structural advantage.
Oh, absolutely. If two players collide at the same exact speed, the 90-kilogram player transfers far more kinetic energy, the heavier player keeps moving, and the lighter player goes flying.
Right.
That's the underlying physics. But it's also about establishing territory. When a player parks themselves in front of the opponent's net to, block the goalie's vision, they're using that 90 kilograms to anchor themselves. Because they're on skates, the defending team cannot rely on friction to just shove them out of the way.
So the defenders literally have to apply enough force to uproot the player's center of mass just to move them.
Exactly. You literally have to uproot them.
And that mass isn't just dead weight.
Right.
It's highly specific body composition. They are roughly 90% muscle, incredibly concentrated in these massive thighs and glutes to maintain a low center of gravity.
Right. Lower body power is everything.
But here is a totally counterintuitive detail from the sources. Alongside all that explosive muscle, these high-speed athletes require a deliberate layer of fat. Which, in a sport governed by speed, you'd initially assume any extra weight is a huge liability.
Yeah. And in a sustained endurance sport, like marathon running, extra fat definitely can be a liability. But hockey is a sport of extreme, intermittent bursts of maximal anaerobic effort. So that fat layer serves two vital physiological purposes. First, it acts as a deep energy reserve.
For the sprints.
Right. During those explosive sprints, the body rapidly burns through its glycogen stores, the carbohydrates that are stored directly in the muscles. If they had an incredibly low body fat percentage, it would leave the athlete without adequate reserve fuel. And that leads to premature systemic fatigue. Their body would literally shut down mid-game.
Wow. Okay, so it's an essential battery pack. And considering the environment, I imagine it's also functioning as insulation.
Precisely. They are spending hours in an arena built around a giant block of ice. A body with zero insulation loses ambient heat rapidly. And when muscles get cold, they stiffen, and the central nervous system actually slows down the transmission of nerve impulses.
Which is the last thing you want.
Exactly. So that layer of fat keeps the core temperature stable, so the muscles remain pliable, warm, and explosive.
That reframes the physical requirements completely.
And speaking of muscle, there's this really persistent myth about the upper body. When people picture a hockey enforcer, they often imagine bodybuilder. But excessive chest or bicep mass is actually a liability.
It severely ruins their flexibility. If we break down the biomechanics of a hockey shot, the power does not come from the arms pushing the puck. It originates in the legs and transfers up through the core. The abdominal and lumbar muscles basically act as a rigid bridge, channeling the driving force of a lower body right into the upper body.
So the arms are really just the final delivery mechanism.
And today's high-tech carbon fiber sticks are designed to bend. So when a player winds up for a shot, they are driving their body weight down into the stick, bending it aggressively against the ice.
They are essentially loading it up like a spring. They flex that composite carbon fiber, storing this massive amount of potential energy. And to release it, they snap their wrists. So what an elite player really needs in their upper body isn't massive biceps to push the stick. They need incredibly dense, powerful forearms and wrists to control that violent, sudden release of potential energy. And, of course, they also need heavily developed shoulders to act as biological shock absorbers for when they inevitably crash into the boards.
Right, because they are crashing. Okay, so we've established this perfectly optimized 90-kilogram low center of gravity machine with tree trunk legs, a fortified core, and steel wrists.
Right?
How is this machine deployed strategically? Because the geometry and the timing of a hockey match dictate everything.
The rink itself is the very first variable. There's a really distinct difference between North American NHL rinks and international rinks. NHL rinks are narrower.
And that changes the whole game.
It fundamentally alters the tactical approach. It forces a much more direct, vertical, and highly physical style of play because there's simply less lateral room to maneuver. International hockey, with its wider ice surface, relies way more heavily on lateral movement and complex passing lanes.
But regardless of the rink size, the structure of the game is universal, right?
Right.
3 20-minute periods.
Right.
But that is strictly effective time. The clock stops at every single whistle, meaning a 60-minute game actually takes a couple of hours to complete in real time.
Right.
And between those periods, the Zamboni takes the ice.
The famous resurfacing machine. And its job goes far beyond just making the ice look pristine for the fans. The ice surface is actually a highly fragile ecosystem. Over a 20-minute period, those sharp skate edges carve deep grooves and generate a really heavy buildup of snowy shavings.
Which would be catastrophic for the puck. I mean, if the puck relies on zero friction to act as that high-speed missile, even a microscopic layer of snow is going to introduce drag.
It introduces a ton of drag. It alters the trajectory of passes and slows the entire game down. It turns a precise game into a sloppy one. So the Zamboni doesn't just sweep up the snow, it actually shaves the damaged top layer off entirely.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then it lays down a thin coat of hot water. The hot water melts into the microscopic fissures and freezes perfectly smooth, resetting the friction coefficient all the way back to zero.
That's incredible. But, the most intense aspect of the game's timing isn't the periods, it's the shifts. I think even hardcore fans sometimes underestimate the physiological marvel of the hockey shift. A player's only on the ice for 45 to 90 seconds at a time.
That is just the harsh reality of the human body's limitations. We discussed the anaerobic demands earlier. A shift isn't a jog. It is a series of maximum output sprints, all while physically wrestling with 90-kilogram opponents.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Well, the human body generates lactic acid during that kind of effort much faster than the bloodstream can actually clear it away. So within a minute, that acid buildup physically inhibits the muscle fibers from contracting. The player literally simply has to get off the ice.
Which necessitates the flying change. And this is such a unique mechanic. They swap players out without stopping the game. It looks like absolute panic players hurtling a wall into the middle of a high-speed play while the exhausted player gasps for air trying to climb out.
It looks crazy, yeah.
But there's a strict synchronized structure beneath that chaos. You can't just jump over the boards. The player you're replacing has to be within a specific distance of the bench to avoid a too many men on the ice penalty.
It requires immense spatial awareness and coordination, all while tracking a live puck. And this constraint also dictates team strategy. You have a roster of 20 players, and the forwards are broken up into trios called lines. These lines play together constantly to develop an instinctual chemistry, and they often feature distinct archetypes.
Right, like you have the playmaker who functions as the architect, reading the ice and distributing passes. The sniper who possesses that fast-twitch wrist-to-strength for lethal shots. And honestly, my favorite role, the grinder.
Grinder is crucial.
Yeah, the grinder is the big body whose sole job is to go into the contested corners, absorb the physical punishment, dig the puck out, and feed it back to the other two.
The very fact that the grinder role even exists highlights how highly contested space is on the rink. Because the shifts are so short, the speed is high, and the ice is confined, the way players interact is fundamentally different from sports like basketball or soccer.
It requires a vital distinction that the sources point out. Ice hockey is a collision sport, not a contact sport.
Exactly.
Basketball features contact like jostling for a rebound. Ice hockey features collisions, two 90-kilogram players crashing into each other at 40 kilometers per hour.
And this violence is highly regulated. It's known as a body check or mise en échec in French. You cannot just hit anyone. You can only target the player who is currently in possession of the puck.
Right, no random hits.
Exactly. You must initiate contact from the front or the side. Never from behind, because driving a player face first into the boards carries a massive risk of catastrophic spinal injury. You are absolutely forbidden from targeting the head, and your skates must remain on the ice. You cannot launch yourself upward.
So the objective of a body check isn't aggression just for the sake of intimidation. It is a highly calculated defensive maneuver. If you deliver a legal collision, you physically steal the space the puck carrier occupies. You force them into a panicked reaction, and you separate them from the puck.
That's the essence of it. It is basically defensive geometry executed through physical force.
Now, it's tempting to look at field hockey, which features sticks, nets, and teams trying to score, and assumes just the summer equivalent of ice hockey. But the underlying physics dictate entirely different universe.
Oh, completely. They share almost nothing but a name. Field hockey is played on synthetic turf, meaning it is a high-friction environment. The projectile is a hard, round ball, not a flat, sliding puck.
Which instantly changes how the object travels and bounces. But the rules fundamentally alter the psychology of the game, too. In field hockey, collisions are strictly forbidden. It is a sport of avoidance. You cannot use your mass to smash someone off the ball.
And the stick mechanics are entirely distinct. In field hockey, players are only permitted to use one flat side of the stick. If the ball touches the rounded back, it is an immediate foul.
Wait, really? Only one side?
Yeah, just the flat side. But in ice hockey, players utilize both faces of the blade, the forehand and the backhand. The biomechanical dexterity required to seamlessly flip a puck from forehand to backhand while navigating zero friction at 40 kilometers per hour is completely absent in field hockey. In field hockey, a player has to physically rotate the entire stick handle in their grip just to use that single legal face.
That is wild. Which brings us to the absolute peak of this deep dive. To survive those 40-kilometer-per-hour collisions while manipulating a puck on both sides of a blade while tracking 4 teammates and 5 opponents, physical reflexes alone cannot possibly be enough. The processing speed required to manage all of that must be off the charts.
It is. If a player relies purely on their reflexes in elite ice hockey, they will fail. The ultimate secret of the sport isn't physical at all. It lies hidden inside the player's neurology.
Let's break down that neurological speed limit. How fast is the brain actually working out there?
Well, for a human being to consciously see an event, process it in the prefrontal cortex, decide on a course of action, and send that motor signal to the muscles, it takes roughly 300 milliseconds.
About a third of a second, which sounds incredibly fast in everyday life.
It's perfectly adequate for walking down the street or driving a car. But on a hockey rink, a high-speed action like a puck being deflected or an opponent closing the gap for a body check requires a physical reaction in under 150 milliseconds.
Whoa. So the game is literally moving twice as fast as the conscious brain can process it.
Yes.
The prefrontal cortex is mathematically too slow to survive on the ice. If they can't consciously react, they must be doing something else.
They are anticipating. They completely bypass the prefrontal cortex and rely on older, faster parts of the brain, specifically the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. These regions handle rapid pattern recognition. The brain is constantly running this subconscious predictive algorithm, simulating the future 200 to 500 milliseconds ahead of real time.
That's amazing. But what inputs are feeding that algorithm? Like, how does the brain predict the future without conscious thought?
It reads physical microclues. An elite player is rarely staring directly at the puck. They are processing the subtle tilt of an opponent's shoulder, the rotation of their hips, and the exact angle of their stick blade on the ice.
Before they even touch the puck.
Right. Before the opponent even makes contact with the puck, the defending player's basal ganglia has already recognized the pattern, calculated the most likely trajectory, and fired the signal to the legs to glide toward the interception point.
That is a brilliant way to explain it. It's like a grandmaster playing speed chess. But they are doing it while riding a roller coaster. They aren't looking at where the pieces currently sit. They are visualizing where the pieces will be 3 moves from now, while someone is actively trying to tackle them.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the reality of the ice, and it perfectly explains the phenomenon of Wayne Gretzky. I mean, Gretzky is universally considered the greatest player in the history of the sport. But if you analyze his physical metrics, he wasn't the biggest player, he certainly wasn't the strongest, and he wasn't even the fastest skater.
So his dominance was entirely neurological. He just had the highest hockey IQ ever recorded.
His predictive algorithm was simply unparalleled. He famously said, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been." His brain's capacity to simulate the geometry of the rink and the movement vectors of the other 9 players half a second into the future meant he never needed pure foot speed. He was already waiting in the optimal position before anyone else realized the play was unfolding.
That completely subverts how we normally think about athletic highlights. When you watch a goalie make a miraculous glove save or a defender blindly intercept a pass behind their back, it looks like a lucky reflex. But it's not a reflex. It's a highly trained, subconscious algorithm executing a prediction.
Anticipation is the true currency of elite hockey. And understanding that allows us to understand the sport's most hidden danger, which is neurological fatigue.
Because running a predictive supercomputer at maximum capacity for an hour has to be incredibly draining on the central nervous system.
Absolutely. Fatigue in hockey is neurological long before it is muscular. When a player is exhausted at the tail end of a long shift or late in the third period, it isn't just that their glycogen stores are depleted. The processing speed of their brain actively degrades. That 150 millisecond response time stretches to 200, then 250 milliseconds.
And as that processing speed drops, their predictive window shrinks. They stop anticipating the future and start reacting to the present. And since we've established that reacting is mathematically too slow, that must be when catastrophic errors happen.
It is exactly when you see the system break down. Bad positioning, missed passes, and most dangerously, a severe spike in injuries. When the predictive window closes, a player can no longer anticipate an incoming collision in time to physically brace their muscles for the impact.
Wow. So to bring all of this together, we started by looking at a game played on a frozen sheet of water. But what you're really outlining is that ice hockey is far more than just physical brawling on skates.
Oh, it really is. It is a meticulously structured neurobiomechanical laboratory. It is a continuous dance of predictive physics where mental anticipation beats physical speed every single time and where the subconscious mind must constantly tame the physical chaos of the body.
That's incredibly well said. And that brings me right back to you listening to this. The next time you watch a hockey game, try a different approach. Don't follow the puck. Look away from it entirely. Watch the empty space. Watch how the players anticipate the changing geometry of the rink, gliding into passing lanes seconds before the puck even arrives. If you watch the space, you will actually see the predictive algorithms running in real time. And that leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to ponder today. We just established that elite hockey is decided by the brain predicting the future 500 milliseconds in advance, and that neurological fatigue destroys that advantage. If expanding that predictive window is the true separator between a good player and a legend, well, could the future of hockey training completely shift away from the weight room? Imagine moving entirely into virtual reality neural training, intentionally overloading a player's brain with impossible visual data points to artificially stretch their predictive window to a full second. If the game is simply speed chess at 50 kilometers per hour, whoever sees the most moves ahead inevitably wins. Until next time, keep diving deep.